Hello and welcome to Bookish. Tonight I wanted to give you my review of Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. This is hopefully going to be a fairly quick review because I don't have a lot to say about the book. And the reason I don't have a lot to say about the book is because I thought it was great. I thought this was a great novel, and I thought it was brilliantly written and brilliantly constructed. And there isn't a whole lot of negative I would say about it at all. As a matter of fact, most of what I want to say about it is positive. So this is my review for Gilead, which was one of the books on my July-August TBR. So the Story of Gilead centers on 3 generations of Congregationalist ministers who live in Gilead, Iowa, and the name of that town gives the book its name. So there are 3 generations of ministers: a grandfather, a grandfather, the father, and the son. The son is the one telling the story in the book Gilead, but I call him the son. By the time he's telling the story in this book, he is in his 70s. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But because it is a multi-generational story, you get, a story that covers a long period of time. More than 70 years of American history, from the days right before the Civil War in the late 1850s all the way to the post-World War II period. And even though these 3 men, these 3 grandfather, father, son, are all Congregationalist ministers, their ideas about the ministry, their ideas about Christianity, the ways in which they practice Christianity and think about it are all very different. And that allows Marilynne Robinson to raise a number of issues involving religion and politics and war and violence and family relationships. And so I don't want to give you a synopsis, really, of the plot of the novel, because I think that would give away too much that Robinson works really hard to reveal subtly. So instead, I want to talk about some of those issues the book raises, give you a brief example of Robinson's writing, and then, one more time really kind of tell you how great the book is. So in the process of telling this story about this family of ministers, Robinson's able to raise a number of issues from American history and American Christianity. Number one being, the meaning of forgiveness. What does that actually mean? What does that look like? How should that take place? What are the obligations of fathers to sons and sons to fathers? And how does that affect forgiveness within families? She raises the issue of Christianity and violence. Should Christians be pacifists, or should they embrace violent conflict in a good cause? In the process of that, Robinson is able to introduce various ideas that her characters have to the Civil War, to World War I, and to World War II and its aftermath. These are issues that divide the 3 generations of ministers in this family, that divide them. They have different approaches and different ideas and different thoughts about that. She's able to bring up issues involving Christianity in the United States and race, and to highlight the fact that for all of our ideas about the Civil War and ending slavery and it being a war to set men free in an almost kind of religious way eventually, Robinson kind of also raises the idea that once that was done, there were real difficulties with the issues of segregation, real difficulties even in a state like Iowa, which was, at the time of the Civil War, was considered to be a hotbed of radicalism in terms of racial equality and things like that. But even in a place like that, racial violence, racism, discrimination become issues, and she's able to kind of talk about that as well. She's able, as I said, to kind of cover a large period of American history, particularly focusing a lot around the events taking place in the Bleeding Kansas period, right before the Civil War took place, and how that divided father and son. And speaking of fathers and sons, I will tell you that if you have any knowledge of the story of Abraham and his sons, it's probably a good kind of background knowledge to have, to kind of apply when we're talking about it, when you're reading Gilead and learning about all these father-son all these father-son relationships. So you might think that, you know, me telling you all these issues are raised in the novel, you might think, well, that doesn't sound very good to me. That sounds really preachy. That sounds like this is a novel about political issues, and it's trying to make a point. And that's not it at all. Number one, those issues are subtext, understanding the relationship between the families. And those issues are raised very subtly by the characters themselves, not the author. This isn't the author talking about these issues. These are the characters themselves, or the primary character, the Reverend Ames, working his way through these issues and thinking about those issues and thinking about how those issues impacted his relationship with his friends, with his children, with his family members, with his father, with his brother, between his father and his grandfather. All those issues are raised in an incredibly subtle way. And it's not a preachy novel trying to make a point. It's just raising the issues in the mind of Reverend Ames and kind of allowing us to see him work his way through those issues. So you should know the novel is told in the form of a letter written by Reverend Ames to his son. Now the Reverend Ames, who is the narrator of Gilead, is a 70-year-old man, 70-plus-year-old man, who remarried late in life. And has a very young son. I believe his son is only 7 years old when Reverend Ames is actually writing the letter to his son. So what we have then is a first-person narrator, and you may have seen a review of mine earlier in which I said, my first reaction when I see something of a first-person narrator is that I don't fully trust what that person is saying. And I think that that's usually, to me, why writers use a first-person narrator, so they can create that kind of unease, that kind of narrow focus in terms of the information we get. I don't want to give you the impression that Reverend Ames is dishonorable or a bad person in any way, but he struggles to tell the whole truth to himself and to his son. And so what happens is he repeats the same stories. More than once. He tells or he refers back to a story, the most important stories, in his family's history. But each time he goes back to it, you learn something else. You learn a detail. You learn, something about that event, and why it's taken on such importance for Reverend Ames, and why it becomes a part of his thinking, and how he thinks about his religion and his relationship with his family. So the only thing I would warn you about with Gilead is you kind of have to work for it. This is not a novel in which there is a tremendous amount of action. This is a novel which essentially takes place in the mind of one of its characters. Okay, and him remembering and writing and explaining himself to his son in a letter which he thinks his son is supposed to read, after Reverend Ames has died. And because of that, you have to work for it. You have to pay attention. You have to think your way through these ideas, and you have to you're almost asked to decide how you feel about some of the issues that Marilynne Robinson raises through the writing of Reverend Ames. So all those things to me make this just an incredibly, staggeringly great book, and it's one of these books that raises the novel to the level, I think, of an art form. But in addition to that, Marilynne Robinson is a good writer, and so I just thought I would read you a good writer. She's a very good writer, if not a great writer. So I just thought I'd read you the very first paragraph of the novel, just to give you some idea of her writing style and kind of how, through the voice of Reverend Ames, she tells the story. I told you last night that I might be gone sometime, and you said, where? And I said, to be with the good Lord. And you said, why? And I said, because I am old. And you said, I don't think you're old. And you put your hand in my hand, and you said, you aren't very old, as if that settled it. I told you you might have a different life from mine, and from the life you've had with me, and that would be what a wonderful thing. There are many ways to live a good life. And you said, Mama already told me that. And then you said, don't laugh, because you thought I was laughing at you. You reached up and put your fingers on my lips and gave me that look I never in my life saw on any other face besides your mother's. It's a kind of furious pride, very passionate and stern. I'm always a little surprised to find my eyebrows unsinged after I've suffered one of those looks. I will miss them. So that's just the very first paragraph. And to me, that first paragraph she kind of had me at hello with the writing style there. But like I said, it is a novel who you have to pay attention to. I don't know how fast you read. I don't read particularly fast, but you're going to want to slow down and savor the language and savor the subtlety and the skill with which Marilynne Robinson tells her story. So let me encourage you to go out and get a copy of Gilead. It is a great book, and I think it's well worth anybody's time to read. So if you read Gilead, let me know what you think, or let me know what you think about the review, or feel free to comment and share any ideas about the channel. Thank you for watching.